Episode 4 of Silo Season 3 is titled Whatever You Do, Don't Go Home, and by the time the credits roll, you will completely understand why. This is the episode where the carefully constructed walls of deception that this season has been quietly building finally begin to crack. Alliances that seemed solid are fracturing. Characters you thought you understood are revealing entirely different sides of themselves. And deep inside the digger void, a place filled with memory, loss, and grief, the show delivers the single greatest twist of the entire season. Someone is alive who was never supposed to be. And if that doesn't shake you, then wait until you understand who made sure of it and why. Because this changes absolutely everything we thought we knew about Robert Sims, about loyalty, about power, and about what is truly coming for everyone still breathing inside that silo. To truly feel the weight of what Episode 4 delivers, you have to go back. Back to the very first episode of this season, back to a scene that most people watched with a sinking heart and accepted as finished business. We watched Robert Sims, cold and deliberate as ever, seemingly ensure the death of Bernard, the former head of IT, a man who had shaped and controlled the silo's fate for so long it felt like the walls themselves obeyed him. The body was wrapped, wheeled toward the incinerator, and consumed, or so we were made to believe. The show lingered on Robert Sims's face in that moment, and if you go back and watch it now, truly watch it, there is something in his eyes that does not read like a man who has just committed an act of finality. It reads like a man carrying a secret so enormous it is physically pressing down on him. Now fast forward to Episode 4. Jules arrives at the Digger Void, a place soaked in emotional meaning for her because it is where she and George once had their secret world together. She is exhausted, hunted, barely holding on to herself. She hears coughing, she approaches. She pulls back the curtain, and there in the dark, very much alive, is Bernard. The reaction to this moment is almost impossible to overstate. This is not a hint. This is not an ambiguous reveal open to interpretation. Bernard is alive, he is conscious, and the first words he says to Jules are simply, calmly, devastatingly, "Hello, Jules." Two words that carry the weight of an entire season's worth of deception, planning, and quiet rebellion happening entirely off-screen. But here is where the storytelling becomes genuinely brilliant. The show does not hand you an explanation. It does not slow down and hold your hand through exactly how this happened. Instead, it trusts you to feel the earthquake of the moment and then start asking the right questions. And the most important question, the one that reframes almost everything we have watched Robert Sims do this season, is this: did he ever actually try to kill Bernard at all? Because when you go back and examine what was shown in Episode 1 with fresh eyes, something feels different. The body being taken toward the incinerator was completely covered. There was no moment of confirmed identity, and Robert Sims was the only person remaining in that space, watching. That close-up on his eyes was not incidental camera work. That was the show planting a flag for a moment exactly like this one. A moment where you would suddenly understand that what you saw and what actually happened were two entirely different things. Sims did not kill Bernard. He saved him. He staged the death well enough to satisfy Camille and the algorithm's directive, and then he hid the one man inside this silo who might, just might, hold enough knowledge, enough history, and enough influence to help change the course of what is coming. But why? Why would Robert Sims, the man who spent seasons as an enforcer, a loyal and sometimes terrifying instrument of the silo's ruling power, suddenly choose to preserve the life of someone he was ordered to eliminate? The answer lives in the deteriorating marriage at the center of this season's most quietly devastating storyline. Robert and Camille Sims are two people who once shared a vision of what power was supposed to look like and what it was supposed to be used for. But the algorithm's selection of Camille did not just elevate her, it transformed her. The woman Robert fell in love with, the woman who had her own convictions and her own line in the sand, has been systematically replaced by something colder. Something that follows orders without question, erases memories, including her own, without hesitation, and views human lives as variables in a calculation rather than as people. The breaking point came in the previous episode when Camille was prepared to have her own memories wiped at the algorithm's command. That was the moment Robert Sims looked at his wife and saw not a partner but a machine wearing her face. The shot of the door closing between them was not subtle. It was the show telling you, in pure visual language, that a divide had opened that no conversation was going to close. And so when Camille says Jules needs to die during the night, framed as a mercy, a preventive measure, something clean and controlled, Robert steps forward and says he will do it. Not because he wants Jules dead, but because he absolutely cannot allow his wife to be the one who pulls that particular trigger. He is buying time. He is placing himself between Camille's darkest impulse and the one person in this silo who might represent any real chance at truth and survival. This is not the Robert Sims we thought we knew. This is something far more complicated and honestly far more interesting. The episode builds this tension with extraordinary control. Every scene involving Sims carries this new weight, the weight of a man who has chosen a side that he cannot yet announce, navigating a world where one wrong word, one moment of visible hesitation could bring the entire carefully balanced structure crashing down. And underneath all of it, hidden in the dark of the digger void, is Bernard, waiting, surviving, perhaps the key to absolutely everything. The episode ends on his face and Jules's stunned silence, and it is, without question, the best ending this season has produced. Most viewers watching episode 4 were focused on the emotional spectacle of Bernard's reveal, and rightfully so. But in the rush of that shock, it is very easy to miss a detail that quietly recontextualizes almost every scene involving Amy the nurse across this entire season. When Amy is helping Jules escape through the silo, giving her oxygen, keeping her moving, navigating the corridors with a purposefulness that does not read like improvisation, she reveals something that should stop you cold. Jules did not begin regaining her memories by accident. Amy had been systematically replacing her memory suppression capsule with something that would do the opposite. She was not maintaining Jules's condition. She was slowly, carefully, covertly reversing it. Think about what that means. Amy was not a passive figure who happened to be present when Jules needed help. She was an active agent operating with intention, operating with a plan, operating, it now seems almost certain, in coordination with Robert Sims. The reason Jules has been experiencing those fragmented dreams, those flickers of George, those moments where something just beneath the surface keeps pressing upward, that was not the story naturally resolving itself. That was Amy working quietly in the background, turning a dial back toward the truth 1 degree at a time. Now ask yourself, how long has this been going on? How many weeks or months of careful, dangerous work did Amy put into this before anyone noticed? And more importantly, who else knew? Because for Amy to have operated this way inside a silo where surveillance, loyalty checks, and the constant pressure of the algorithm's authority are facts of daily life, she would have needed either an extraordinary level of invisibility or the protection of someone with enough power to create blind spots around her. The most logical answer is Robert Sims. If Sims has been working in the shadows, redirecting raiders, protecting Jules during their first encounter, preserving Bernard, then having Amy positioned as a nurse with access to Jules' medical care fits perfectly into that quiet, careful architecture of resistance. Sims is not a man who charges at problems directly. He calculates, he positions pieces, he creates the conditions for things to happen without ever appearing to be the one making them happen. This also explains something that felt slightly odd earlier in the season. Why Amy directed Jules toward a specific location, and why Sims's response to encountering Jules was so conspicuously restrained. He knew she was there. He let her be there. Because every move he has been making has been guiding events toward a specific outcome that we have not yet fully seen. The memory restoration is also critically important to the story's larger momentum. Jules without her memories is Jules without her full self. Without the drive, the knowledge, the emotional anchor of everything she has experienced and fought for. Getting those memories back is not just a personal journey. It is what makes Jules capable of being the person this story needs her to be in whatever confrontation is coming. Amy understood that. Sims understood that, and they built a quiet plan around it while everyone else was watching the louder parts of the boa. Here is where things become genuinely fascinating, because episode 4 has opened up enough space for theories that could fundamentally reshape how we understand where this season is heading. The most pressing theory, and the one that feels most supported by what we have seen, is that Robert Sims has been building an underground coalition for far longer than any single episode suggested. Consider the pieces currently in play. Bernard is alive and hidden. Amy was operating as an embedded ally. Jules is recovering her memories and her sense of self. Sims has been misdirecting official resources away from the people he is actually protecting. This is not a man reacting to circumstances. This could mean that Sims has been planning something structured and deliberate, and that the algorithm selecting Camille was actually the event that accelerated his timeline rather than derailed it. It is possible that Sims always had doubts about the direction the silo's leadership was heading, but that as long as he was the one holding the lever, he could manage those doubts internally. The moment Camille was elevated and began becoming something he no longer recognized, those private doubts likely became private actions. And private actions in a place like the silo are the most dangerous kind of revolution there is. Bernard's role going forward is something worth thinking carefully about. He is not simply a figure from Jules's past or a symbol of the old guard. He is someone who, at his worst, maintained the silo's lies with ruthless efficiency, but who, in a different light, understands the machinery of this place more intimately than almost anyone alive. It is possible that whatever Bernard knows, whatever he experienced after waking from what Sims did to make him unconscious instead of dead, has given him a perspective that could be the most valuable asset Jules has ever had access to. There is also the question of what the algorithm actually is and what it is truly optimizing for. Camille's willingness to erase her own memory at its command suggests a level of control that goes beyond political authority into something closer to total behavioral override. This could mean that the algorithm is not simply a governance tool. It could be something older, something designed by the original silo architects with a specific endgame encoded into it that none of the current inhabitants fully understand. If that is true, then Bernard, who spent his career inside the machinery of IT, closest to whatever data and directives the silo actually runs on, might be the only person who has any real idea of what they are all actually inside of. In the Before Time storyline, Daniel and Helen's investigation is threading towards something that this theory would support. Their suspicion that the Iran mission, the government's secret project, and the creation of the silos are connected feels less like conspiracy theorizing and more like careful detective work, converging on a truth the show is slowly building toward. The idea that the silos were always intended as a survival mechanism, and that the people inside them are not survivors of an accident but participants in a design, changes the moral stakes of everything happening in the present timeline entirely. Episode 5 is titled Memory, and that single word carries an enormous amount of narrative promise and potential danger. The most immediate expectation is that Jules's memory restoration is going to accelerate dramatically now that she is in the digger void, surrounded by physical objects and spaces tied to George and to her former self. Bernard's presence is likely to act as a catalyst for this, not just because he can fill in gaps in her knowledge, but because he represents a direct line back to the authority structures she spent so long fighting against and the truth she nearly died to uncover. Watching Jules and Bernard navigate their history together, in a space that already carries so much emotional weight, could be one of the most powerful sequences this season produces. But the stakes are not sitting still while that reunion plays out. Camille now knows that Jules escaped, that Amy betrayed her, and that whatever plan she had for a quiet, managed death in the night has been completely destroyed. A Camille operating under the algorithm's directive with full awareness that her controlled narrative is unraveling is a Camille who becomes significantly more dangerous, significantly faster. The resources she commands, the loyalty she can demand, and the ruthlessness she has already demonstrated all suggest that Episode 5's conflict will be pressing in from every direction simultaneously. Robert Sims's position is also becoming precarious in a way that will be impossible to sustain for much longer. He has been walking a razor's edge between appearing loyal to Camille and actively undermining her plans. The moment she begins tracing back what actually happened, who redirected the raiders, who failed to eliminate Jules when given the opportunity, who might have been the last person to confirm Bernard's death, her eyes are going to land on her husband. And when that happens, the emotional collision between those two characters will be one of the defining scenes of this season. There is also the threat of Lucas Carl and Patty Kennedy's group, which feels like it is building toward a physical convergence on the Digger Void. If Lucas Carl knows where Jules was likely to go, and given his history with her, it is entirely reasonable that he does, then the possibility of that reunion adds yet another layer of complexity to what is already a powder keg of a situation. In the before times, whatever Sam found in his investigation is going to matter enormously. The episode made clear that it was significant enough to change his mind entirely, and the implication is that it connects directly to the larger architecture of what the silos actually represent. If Daniel and Helen get access to that information and manage to protect it, the show could be setting up a moment where the before times storyline and the present timeline collide in understanding, where what the audience knows from the past finally illuminates what the characters in the silo are living through. Whatever happens next, one thing is clear. The silo has never felt more alive, more dangerous, or more unpredictable, and the people who thought they were in control are about to discover just how many moves have already been made against them.